Okay, hello and good morning. This is video 688. Today is July 12th, 2020, and I wanted to make a video today because I had a dream last night that made me, when I woke up this morning, sometimes, have you ever had a dream that just, when you wake up, it just takes you a good 30 minutes to wake up and say, what in the heck was that about? And what do I do about it? You know, was it a dream that was, entertaining? Sometimes a dream is just a dream. Was it significant? Was there symbolism in it? Was there something to be learned from it? Uh, you know, was it a dream of problem solving? Sometimes our minds, when we sleep, continue to work on the problems that we have in our lives. Um, or was it gibberish? Sometimes our dreams is our mind processing information and filing it away for later use. I mean, dreams can have many different, uh, you know, many different functions. And so I was trying to figure out what this dream was. But the question that popped out of my head was, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And I'll give a little bit of background about the dream itself, but it was me at different stages in my life, and uh, you know, different parts of my life being personified in different characters, and maybe different figures from history or whatnot, and trying to figure out who and what I am, and what I was trying to do. In the dream, I was chasing after someone romantically, and then confronted with that. What is your sexuality? What do you prefer? There was a time in your life where you thought you pursue women in a romantic or a sexual way, and then there was a period of time where you entertained the idea of maybe being pursued by a man as a woman. You know, there's been a lot of times in my life where that polarity has switched. And so it was looking at, as a young person, as a preteen, and then a teenager, and then post-teen, young adult, and then someone maybe in their 30s, and then kind of heading more into middle age, 40s. I'm 48. I'm almost 50 years old. My life is half over. And, waking up and going, okay, what am I doing here? Who am I? Who am I? That's what I kind of kept on coming back to. And, uh, it's where I'm at in middle age, and of course that's the name of the channel. It's One Transit Middle Age. Um, Half my life is over. You know, I spent 40 some odd years of my life living a false life, or trying. I think maybe it's more appropriate to say trying to come to terms with what I wanted to be. And look at your hands, and who we are looking out at this body. You could say our soul. I like to think of it as our brain. But, who are we in a personality? If you could separate that from the body, which is probably, the source of numerous fictional works of fiction, whether it be movies or stories or books or TV shows or whatnot. But, our soul, our who we are, our personality is we're we're trapped inside this machine that we use to function in the world. You know, like I said, I look at my hands. I have big hands, I have big feet. I wasn't born with a big penis, so there goes that theory. But you know, as a kid, and especially in light of being transgender and wanting to be like my sister and wanting to wear the clothes, the skirt and a dress and you know, to just be, to just exist as a girl would be. You know, playing with dolls. It's all stereotypical, unfortunately, and it's all my apologies to the non-binary folks out there. It's all binary. I mean, I'm a product of my age. I'm a woman of my time, as they say. I'm a person of my time. I was raised in a binary world, and so I still have that binary hardwired. So I have to apologize if you're non-binary. You have a much freer and open view of the world than I do. And not that it doesn't mean I can't change it, but it's just my natural where I fall back to. You know, when I run for cover, that's where I run to because it's just my programming. It's my brainwashing. It's the way I was raised. But anyway, you know, I can remember one of my earlier memories of being in elementary school, and you know, you got the little treasure chest. If you were good in kindergarten, in first grade, my teacher had this cardboard box that was decorated like a treasure chest. And if you were good or you did good behavior, you know, you did something good, you were recognized for your behavior. You got to choose an item out of the treasure chest, and inside of it, you know, with stickers and plastic spiders, you know, rings you put on your finger, and it had a spider on it, you know, cool stuff. But one of them was a candy lipstick, and I so wanted the candy lipstick. But I was so afraid of what my teacher would think and what the other kids would think about, you know, well, Robin took the candy lipstick. You know, what does that mean? You know. So I didn't. But the opportunity presented itself at a later date, and I actually stole one. And you know, I was in first grade, a little boy, and I had it, and I ultimately I threw it in the bushes. I got rid of the evidence, and because I knew I shouldn't have had it, you know, it wasn't for me. I was a boy, and I had these feelings, and what would later become my own conversations with God, um, my own negotiations with God. You know, please God, turn me into a girl, turn me into a girl, let me be a girl. Or if I was repressing it, you know, no God, I don't want to be a girl, I don't want to be a girl, but I did. Um, you know, and growing up as a Catholic, which as soon as I say that, whatever images you have of Catholicism is going to come to the forefront, and you're going to label me as that, and so I'm a little hesitant to do that. But and I'm trying to remember why I just said that. Oh, you know, Jesus, he healed the sick. He walked on water. He turned water into wine. You know, the loaves and the fishes, all of these miracles. Surely God could change me into a girl, especially if I was a good person, right? You know, why did I have to wait to go to heaven, the land of milk and honey, to be a soul that had no body, to experience what it was like to be a girl or whatnot, you know. And so a lot of my earlier life was that way. And so anyway, I guess what I'm driving towards is that time spent where my friends were playing with Legos and Star Wars and guns, lots of guns. I don't know what it is about boys and guns. Um, but, during that time, let's say the first 10 years of my life, the boys, my friends, they knew who they were. They knew who they were. They were boys, you know. And my friends that I had that were girls, they knew they were girls. But I didn't know who I was. Who am I? Who am I? I had a friend, and I've alluded to in a previous video, who we would play family, and she dressed me up as her aunt, or her at some point I was her daughter, at some point I was her aunt, and so we used her play makeup she had, and she did my makeup, and I got to wear her apron, and I don't think I wore her clothes, but they were play clothes. And I can remember when her mom found out about it, and she gave my friend the sternest talking to. And I don't know if the mom reached out to my parents and said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what was going on or whatnot. But I can remember that we were told we couldn't do that anymore. When you're a little child and the parent tells you, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. And I was like, well, why? And that began, I'm sure you can relate to and probably have your own experience about that. What was so liberating and magical, that I could be a girl, that I could be a mom, I could be an aunt, I could be a sister, I could be a daughter. I could be a vessel that would emulate or experience, allow those needed emotions to vent, and to know that it was right and it was authentic. To have that repressed, I'm sure you've had that experience as a kid. But again, that confusion, who am I? Who am I? And, when I left that period of my life and became more of a teenager, and I learned, I was so afraid. I was so afraid, the assumption, I can only jump to my next experience point, which is going to be scouting, Boy Scouts. There was such a clash. There was the old guard, who were brought up from what I'm going to say the 50s and the 60s and maybe the 70s version of scouting, before the I'm not going to say before the Church of Latter-day Saints took it over, but masculinity. For example, my scoutmaster was a Marine Corps drill instructor, retired drill instructor, a DI, and he ran the troop like his unit. We were his men. We were his discipline. Push-ups, and again, hyper masculinity to the extreme. That was the old guard, and then I came in the 80s, and that was transitioning again. The Church of Latter-day Saints kind of took it over, and it was okay to be somewhat feminine. You didn't have that hardcore butch masculinity, and there was some passive, ideas of leadership or inspiration or development, blah 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 blah. Things that had always been there but somewhat repressed. That wasn't necessarily homosexual, but it was perceived as homosexual, because it was effeminate as opposed to this masculine model, whatnot. Anyway, so as I rose up through the ranks, I quickly became first class, and I was star forever. I was a star for a long time, like almost a year and a half. And then I got my life and my eagle. I was an Eagle Scout. I am an Eagle Scout. Still am, obviously. Aren't you an Eagle Scout? Always an Eagle Scout. But, you know, it was a period of time of again asking, well, who am I? Who am I? I still have these desires, and trying to come with terms and who and what it is, and I had built up a false structure, or I built up my walls of defenses, and I still kept my inner desires safe and secret and separate because I was ashamed of them and felt guilty and I had to repress. But I could perform and function in this masculine world. Again, with scouting, I'd become a junior assistant scoutmaster, and Order the Arrow, I was a chapter chief. I was a leader, etc., etc. I performed very well in this environment, and I was headed towards that with going to the Air Force Academy. Going to go be an Air Force officer and everything. It was changing one set of a paramilitary organization to a military organization and structure, and it enabled, I could still keep those feelings on hold. But I got to a point, where the false skin that I was wearing begun to rot. This false masculine self, or my false self, was rotting. It was a rotten skin, and it stunk. And there were bits of the inner self that were kind of peeking and poking and coming out, and it was such a... I had told a story before about, one weekend I was by myself, and I had the showers to myself, and I shaved my legs, and it just felt so good. And in my quarters I could, be who I wanted to be. And then it was such a dichotomy. Put on my uniform and, be the man. I don't know. But anyway. But again, that sense of who am I? Who am I really? That persisted into my, teenage years and early 20s. So who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And, when the Air Force Academy didn't work out, and I dropped out, because, again, I remember the day it happened. It was a Donahue show, and they had unfortunately, I'm going to say transvestites on. They weren't. I don't think they were trans women. They were cross dressers, and although the joke is a difference between a trans woman and a cross-dresser is 6 months. But can't take credit for that. I heard that. But it was a show, and it was, can you tell the difference between women and really good cross-dressers? And I just looked at it, and I was like, well, hell, that's possible. Could I do something like that? Could I live my life as a woman, etc., etc.? And that question it popped up again. Who am I? Who am I? I've spent 2 years of my life, grooming myself to be a second lieutenant in the Air Force. And it's a lie. Who am I? And, that was really when all hell broke loose. My walls came down, and I found myself in Atlanta. I knew I was transgender, and I mentioned the story. I went to the therapist and said, I'm trans, and the therapist was like, no, you're just confused. Let's talk. Tell me about your father. Tell me about your mother. And that kind of set me back some. But, jump from that point in my life, it was a major point, in a multiverse. A young Robin probably stayed in Atlanta and transitioned and became a woman in her 20s. Good for her. That's not this reality, though. this universe. But, fast forward a couple of years from there, found myself at the University of Florida, and I was in the I wanted to be a science teacher, middle school science teacher, and I ultimately became one. But, you know, I was in grad school, and I graduated. I walked on the stage. I was dating. I was gonna marry a nice Jewish girl. I was converted to Judaism. Made that mention too. I didn't renounce my Catholicism, but I converted to Judaism to marry this girl, this Jewish girl. And we were gonna have a family, and again, it's like I had got to another point, and that's when the transgender thing popped back up again. It was like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You're gonna get yourself into a trap. You're gonna get married, and you're married. The person to which this woman is thinking doesn't really exist. It's a false self, and the right thing to do would be not to marry her. You know, in the same way that I was working my way as a science teacher and working my way towards being a department head. I could have gone on to be a vice principal, and it was just, again, it was every day Mr. Parks, Mr. Parks, and I was just like, I'm living this lie. Who am I? I'm not this person. And so I changed course again. I reinvented myself. Or I broke apart who I was, and I tried to figure this out. And again, you probably have similar stories where you've done some false starts. And so then I decided, well, if I can't transition as a teacher, because at the time it wasn't acceptable. It's not like it is right now. We're talking 20 years ago. Late 90s, mid 90s, rather. And, so then I hit across the idea of going into theater because, theater is gay people, right? The world of theater, it's, anything goes, and I could transition on the job, and that's what I was going to do. And, that actually was probably one of the longer career choices that I did. I went back to school, and I got my technical theater degree, and worked in 4 different theaters over the course of 2 years. And I was a master carpenter. I led the scene shop. I was also a good painter, and I was a deck electrician. Installed, doing light installations and everything, and it was really cool. And it sounded like a great, again, I could have become a creative director at a theater. That's kind of what I was headed towards. And that's what got me up to Louisville, working in theater and whatnot. And I was going back to grad school to get my master's in it. And just one day, I just walked in and I was like, this isn't for me. This isn't for me. Who am I? I had a better idea who I was by that time. And my hair, was down my back because I didn't cut it, and everything. And so, I was moving towards a more gender neutral presentation at that time. I need money. You got to work, right? And so I entered kind of the professional world and entered corporate America. As it turns out, cut my hair and worked at Humana, and loved it. And I felt like for the first time in my life I was building a foundation. I could stay at this company and transition, and if I wanted to. And da 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 da. but I was lonely, and I tried a couple relationships, and I kind of hit up against a bit of an obstacle that was like, well, are you a man? Are you a woman? By that time I basically was cross dressing. I would live my life, Friday at 5 o'clock when I got home from work until Sunday at 10 o'clock. I was a woman, lived as a woman, and went out and dressed, and then I went grocery shopping as a woman, and everything. But then, come Sunday at 10 o'clock, take off my makeup, take off my bra, put my clothes away, and that was kind of the setting out. And my friend Lacey tells a story about, she knew one weekend she was at she would go to away from her family where she could be herself. And one weekend, as she was packing up her stuff, she realized that she had to make a change. She could no longer put Lacey in a box. She had to become Lacey, which is kind of a neat story. But anyway, so again, as a young 20-ish adult, I just again was like, well, who am I? Who am I? What do I want to be? Who's the person that I want to be? And we could fast forward a little bit further down the road. I did find, I did put some of that in a box. I had a cool box in my closet where I kept all my skirts and everything. And, I kind of left it as, well, one day I'll get to that. One day I'll figure out who that is. And I met somebody who I ended up marrying and having our child. We had a baby girl who's my daughter, who's in that room over there. And, after my daughter was born, those feelings came back up again. This isn't right. You need to change. You need to. And that's when it was like, okay, I'm surrender. I'm gonna pursue this. And unfortunately, my marriage did not survive the transition. That was another point. Who am I? Well, now I'm gonna find out. We've tried all these other things. Didn't work. Let's do this. Let's try it out. Process of elimination. And that's the road I've been on for 4 years. And, in my dream, those different stages of my life were personified. And I kept on saying, who am I? Who are you? Who are you? Who am I? And so that's kind of what I woke up with today. Well, who am I? I'm 48 years old, and I still don't know who I am. Much like I didn't know who I was before, I definitely am a lot closer to who I want to be or who I am. Over the course of 2 years of going full time, much like you, I imagine, I went through my second puberty, mentally, physically. I went through the phase of fingernails and makeup and dresses and heels, and I went into hyper femininity because I wanted to experience it. And now I've found along that spectrum where I'm most comfortable with. And I'm still asking myself that question. Who am I? Who am I? And at first I kind of thought of, well, I'm jealous of people. I'm jealous of people who know who they are. That was my first reaction. You see them on Facebook, you know. Facebook, unfortunately, is vacation photos. You know, you see people at their best lives. You know, we went to vacation. We went to Cancun. You know, we went on this trip. Here's our pictures. You know, you see the best snapshots of their lives. Although you could arguably say sometimes you see their worst when, you know, oh, we got in a car accident, our air conditioner blew up, you know, da 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 da. But I look at other people and I think they know who they are. You know, that was my first reaction. And what's wrong with me because I don't know who I am? Or some jealousy. Definitely some jealousy. I have to admit, you know, I'm jealous of someone who's, uh, you know, much like I think about the girls. And you could probably say that, you know, maybe some of them were butch lesbians and they didn't know it yet. You know, some of them were trans men and they didn't know it yet. But, you know, the cis girls that their gender aligned with their sexual as they were assigned as birth, that their genitalia, it all lined up. And, you know, were they in my shoes time wise? You know, they've had 48 years of a life that was aligned with what they wanted to do and who they were. I'm jealous of that. I'm honest, you know. In the same way that, you know, I'll never know what it's like to be a Girl Scout or a Brownie. I'll never know what it's like to, you know, be on the cheerleader squad or be madly in love with the you know, the quarterback of the high school team, you know, those kinds of things. Go to prom, wear a dress, etc., etc. You know, it's not something I want to do right now, but I'll never have those memories. I'll never be able to experience that firsthand. And there's a lot. Like I said, I recently have really identified where I'm jealous of those things. And there's nothing other than acknowledging it. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You know, just to say, okay, yeah, well, you know, maybe you volunteer at the high school for the next prom, and that way you can, you know, from a third person, you can, you know, experience it vicariously or whatnot, maybe. But, you know, I'm very, like I said, I have to admit, I'm very envious. I'm very envious. And the people that I work with, who again seem like they have their lives together. And I was building up to a point. Let me go back to that. That was my first reaction. There's something wrong with me. I'm jealous of these people. But my second reaction to that was, it's probably not that way for them. They probably have their own trials and tribulations of their lives. And much like Facebook is vacation photos of highlights, their lives are probably, you know, full of their own drama. And, you know, maybe they're gay, maybe they're trans. You don't have to be gay or trans to have problems in your life. You know, bad boss, a bad spouse, a mother-in-law who's making your life an utter hell. That's, you know, that's not limited to trans. That's everywhere. And so the reality is that other people have those, you know, and what used to be called the midlife crisis, isn't that just another example of who am I? Who am I? And I've made mention of it too as part of this process, the trans process, is we are given a blank slate to figure out who we are and who we want to be. You know, if you were living as a false person named Terry and you realized you were transgender, and I deliberately chose Terry because Terry could be a man or a woman, right? Smart. Sometimes. And Terry worked in an office as an accountant or a CPA, and that same thing. Worked in an accounting office as a comptroller. And Terry decided to transition into their authentic self. And become Jamie. Another gender neutral name. Jamie, for example. And, now Jamie is the man or the woman that they've always wanted to be. They're given an opportunity to put on that glove, as it were, and stretch their fingers and figure out what it is, who they want to be. They have the option of leaving that accounting office and doing something else. They could go to chef school and become a pastry chef. They could become a firefighter. Imagine that if you were a trans man and you're now in this body that's full of power. Not necessarily anger, but power. And you had a little body, and now you're developing these muscles and upper body strength, and now you could become a firefighter or a policeman, or something like that. You're literally born again, and you have the option of changing your occupation, and yes, I have to acknowledge that there may be some sacrifice in that. We definitely stand to lose all of our friends, lose all of our family, unfortunately lose our children. All of those things that maybe were built on a false premise, a false person. When that person's gone, and then you really learn who your real friends are, usually. But now you're this other person, and you have a blank slate. You can be anything in the world you want to be, and as liberating as that is, that's also scary. As Devo once said in the song Freedom of Choice, freedom of choice is what you want. And then freedom from choice becomes what you want. You don't want that. That's Devo for you. But, again, so it's quite a long drive to this point, I admit. But who am I? Who am I? I've been saying that all my life. And it's a great degree of freedom to say, I get to decide what that is. And unfortunately or fortunately, like I said, there's some entanglements there. If your marriage survived your transition, you have, and maybe if your marriage didn't survive, you may have child support or alimony or something like that. You may still have some entanglements to keep you. But, for all intents and purposes, you've become something else. You've become someone else. You're allowing that inner person, that inner child, that inner girl, that inner boy to develop and to become a man or a woman. And again, I apologize to my non-binary friends. That's the way I was raised. We'll change that statement. You can be whatever you want to be along the spectrum of male, female, somewhere in between. Neither, both. It's whatever you want to be. And that can be scary. That can be scary. But I find myself here at this point, 48 years old. And, maybe there is a caveat to that. We are still held accountable for the decisions that we made prior to our transition. For example, I will always be a father to my daughter. I will always be responsible. I will always be, that's a lifelong commitment. We can't forego those things. Whether it's, hi baby, whether it's a legal obligation, internet star by accident, whether it's, sorry, derailed my thought process. We still have those obligations. That still form, and again, I've never met a parent who has transitioned and says, "Oh, I wish I, we still have our love and our obligations that we have." I forgot where I was going with this point. But we still get to define who we are. Who am I? Who am I? And who do I want to be? And, today I woke up and it was like, instead of asking yourself, who am I? Get up and do it. My personality is, I'm wearing 2 mismatched socks, a ratty old Star Wars t-shirt, and a skirt that I've spilled bleach on. So it's like 4 different colors. And that's who I am. And that's me. Who you are is going to be something totally different. And you get to decide who that is. You get to experience it. And so what initially was a sense of fear and foreboding this morning when I woke up has kind of become somewhat liberating. Who am I? Go find out. Live your life and find out. It's sad somewhat that it's taken me 48 years to realize that. And certainly, as I've said before about this process, it is a shame that for some of us, we're unable to transition until so far in our lives that, it becomes somewhat of an obstacle. Why do I want to transition now? I'm already established. I'm already blah, 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 blah. That's a question each of us has to answer. For some of us, it's I know for me, it's something I put off until the point that I really had no choice. I had to do it. So, anyway, who am I? Whoever you want to be. But, like I said, I can remember years and years of regret. And I guess it's just a matter of putting your foot on the ground and figuring. You gonna walk backwards? Alright. Well, I'll take that as a sign. I need.
I want to be in your video.
Oh, okay. Alright.
Like you could blur me or like edit me out.
I'll put my finger. How about I do that? Alright, so I'm going to end the video here. This is a good point. I'll put my hand up. So best of luck to you, and the best of good luck in becoming your authentic self as you define it. All right, bye-bye.